各位观众朋友们，新年好！欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jim 马健，我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们去讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jimmy,
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks. You've been away.
Quite a bit happened. I've been traveling. I just got back from Los Angeles, and it's been very stressful times, best of times and worst of times. So you have anything different, anything new come up?
Yeah, the big thing for me personally is that just before Christmas, I tested positive for COVID. And that caused me to need to self-isolate within our home while all of our family collected from literally all over the world here. And the bad news is I tested positive and had to self-isolate, which was a little difficult and clumsy for our family get-together because I didn't want to spread it, in part because two of my daughters had to return to their other countries, England and Australia. So to get on the airplane, they had to test negative. So we were doubly careful. And I have a brand new granddaughter who doesn't have immune. So we wanted to be even more careful because of all of that. So that part we succeeded. But the best news is, so the bad news is I got COVID positive. The best news is 10 days later, 12 days later, I tested negative again. So given that I'm triple vaccinated and now have had it and am negative, I'm about as good a position as a person can be in. I am no danger to anyone else, and no one else is a danger to me. And so that's the good news, and I'm facing the new year with a great deal of optimism. But it's also caused me to think about what all is going on with our fight against COVID. And I have a very different point of view than most people about the COVID surge. And I think the Omicron surge. And actually, I think it is good news for everyone. And I can explain that if you would like.
I would love to hear it. Sir, first of all, it's a relief in a way. You are out of my circle of friends. Everyone I know has been getting it. And this is from someone that is triple vaccinated. You wear masks everywhere you go. It's just a shame that it happened over the holiday period where Christmas, New Year's, where all your family's in town. So you're telling me that you had to eat separately from everyone and you were basically alone in the room while they were all there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could yell at each other back and forth.
I'm sorry to hear. So My point is that this needs to be over. I cannot believe we're going to year 3 of this mess. And it's a blessing in disguise. And I'm sorry to tell you this. It really is. And no matter what you're going to tell me in the next 20 minutes, I'm sorry that you got it, but I'm also happy that you did. Because your symptoms, obviously, whether the symptoms or not, you're as healthy, like you said, as you've ever been. We know that symptoms will be mild. CDC has revised it to only 5 days quarantine. And what else can we do? We did everything we could. We isolated. For 2 years, we toughed it up. We circled the wagons. We got vaccinated. We wore masks. And this is where we are today. And I know that traveling in the last 2 weeks, I just got tested. I'm pretty sure that is going to be positive also, but it's okay. It's still a shock, right, when you first got it. So as we walk through this, it was shocking to me.
Yes, it is. And you do have to, you're going to go through, if you haven't started already, given your diagnosis, you're going to have to go through a period of isolation like I did. I actually thought it was a good time to go through isolation because from a business standpoint, the rest of the world slows down over the holiday period. And so being out of circulation and frankly, it was a great time to rest. I won't say relax, but I will say rest. And I read 3 very important books that have influenced my thinking, all of them about COVID. Number one is Pandemia. These are all bestsellers. Number one is Pandemia by Alex Berenson, who is a reporter, an independent political guy. He's not a scientist, but he has delved into the science and presented a very strong case for things that we need to do better as a society. Number two is a group called A Plague on Our House, which was written by a gentleman named Dr. Scott Atlas, who was President Trump's advisor on COVID from August of last year through the end of the year, and for 6 months, through January of 2021. And it was a story of his encounter with the medical establishment in Washington. And it was a wild ride, fascinating story. And then the third book is by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., very liberal guy, called The Real Dr. Fauci. And that book is all about the conflicts of interest within the medical establishment. Big pharma, big institutions, hospitals. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But I purposefully wanted to read from people from all walks of life, a medical scientist like Dr. Atlas, a journalist, a lifelong politician like Bobby Kennedy Jr., family from the very liberal side, all
very
the way.
Very different perspectives without any preconceived notions, any baggage. A very fair and very a total look.
And they all come to very similar conclusions.
Which was
the whole approach to our COVID response starting in February or March of 2020 was all wrong. The first thing wrong was we treated everybody the same. And what we should have done is looked at high-risk groups to protect the high-risk groups. And there are two fundamental high-risk groups. One, elderly, we know that, and knew it at the time, elderly. And two, people with comorbidities at every age level. But we didn't do that. We treated everybody the same. The second thing we did wrong, it was because we treated everybody the same and we were afraid of the spread, we locked down. And the lockdowns not only did nothing to protect the most vulnerable, particularly the elderly and those in nursing homes, but they endangered most everyone else. And number three, we didn't recognize that children with only extraordinarily rare situations got infected with COVID, and those that did, virtually 100% had comorbidities. Almost everyone, certainly everyone in what I read, said the best thing we could have done was keep our schools open. Because children are much safer in schools than they are at home, in part because they have found statistically, every one of these books found the same conclusion, that children do not spread COVID. They get COVID from adults, but there's no evidence of any child ever spreading it to either his parents or his teachers. So we made a series of wrong decisions, et cetera, et cetera. Now, fast forward to where we are today. We're also making a bunch of very bad decisions today. The concern you've expressed, Jimmy, about you and your friends, and when I told you about my problem, your concern for me, and I appreciate that. People are afraid of the Omicron variant. But the reality of it is twofold. Number one, it is so contagious that everybody is likely to get it very quickly. The number of cases is exponentially off the chart. And actually, measuring cases is an irrelevant task right now. It doesn't matter whether people in general are infected with it again. Part of this is a media narrative because they continue to use two words that scare the hell out of people: contagious and infection. But just because a person is infected with the virus doesn't mean that they're going to get sick. And the beauty of Omicron is that the symptoms overwhelmingly are very mild. And if you look at the two indexes that are extremely important to measure, hospitalizations and death, now those are lagging indicators where cases is a leading indicator. But if you look at those, 99 point some high percentage of the people in hospitals and those who have been ill and who have passed away overwhelmingly have not had the vaccines and have other comorbidities. Now, I'm going to go back and say one of the other things that the system did wrong is they did not emphasize the importance of health. They talked about comorbidities, people who were not healthy, people who had diabetes, hypertension, blood pressure, high blood pressure, COPD, respiratory problems, congestive heart failure, things like that. And that makes perfect sense. Many of the people who passed away with COVID with comorbidities were likely to be very ill anyway. That's not to say that losing their life wasn't a tragedy for them and their families, but there are relatively well-known therapies for people who get it. Hydroxychloroquine is one. Ivermectin is another. And just in the last several weeks, there have been introduced new therapies as well. The Biden administration is talking about buying these new pills, et cetera, et cetera. We as a society and the hospital and medical establishment have spent very little time and discussion on what those therapies are and administering those therapies. And there are some reasons for that, which are difficult to talk about. But the real point is, if somebody gets sick today, the strong odds are that if they have been vaccinated and if they are in otherwise reasonably good health, they are very likely to have only mild symptoms. And even if they're hospitalized, they will be in and out relatively quickly. And combining that, if you remember back at the very beginning, I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but everything is tied together. The whole idea was flatten the curve. Try to keep people back in the original surge from getting it, because the initial fear was overwhelming the medical system. And somewhere around the second surge, when Delta actually surged, the medical system across the country was overwhelmed. But today it's not. There may be a few isolated places, but there's still very, very ample capacity throughout the medical system, both for hospital beds and ventilators and the other things. So what I actually think, Jimmy, is Omicron is a blessing for us. And here's what I mean by that. If a large percentage of people get infected, have the Omicron variant, but do not get sick, what happens is they develop the antibodies. And the antibodies plus the vaccinations provide ultimate protection, and that's ultimately known as herd immunity. And when a big population approaches herd immunity, which arguably is somewhere in the 80 to 90% range, then the epidemic becomes endemic and new variances are no longer created. So given the characteristics of what we think we know about Omicron, to me, and maybe it's because I'm being very fortunate and came out with a good result, I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I think it's something to be dealt with. And
no, it's not afraid. The media has led to this. I agree with everything you said. You know, the way that we view this is just like everybody else. I don't think our views are different. We're getting new information as it goes. After 2 years, we're very careful. We did our part. We were masked. We're fully vaccinated. This happened. We deal with it, no doubt. However, we don't know the long-term data. So CDC is coming up with new guidelines, and Omicron is highly contagious, but a lot milder symptoms. We know that, and it is proven to you, on you. My concern is not for myself. We're healthy adults. We don't know if each children, what are the long-term effects on your lungs, how the children are going to handle it. And we want to make sure we don't spread it to anybody that's immune compromised or elderly. Now, during those days, the few days of isolation, which must be hard for you during the holidays, were there any treatments? We looked it up, lots of vitamin D, lots of vitamin C, basically be healthy.
Vitamin D and zinc are apparently very big. And I take vitamin D routinely anyway.
Yes. Maybe that's why you have very mild symptoms. Was it
it could well be.
A little bit of a cough, a little bit of cold?
Yeah, a little bit. Just
like a regular mild flu or mild cold.
A mild cold, yeah. Yeah. No other symptoms.
Look, Jim, it's actually kind of sad that for the two of us that have completely supported what the scientific community, what the CDC has told us, which is to curb the spread. We followed everything down to the T. We wore masks, we're vaccinated. So in a way, in the beginning, it will be a shock. So for those of you that has tested positive and that has followed and that is not a how do I say this, anti-science or anti-mask person, if you're one of us, just know that literally, just personally, without looking at the numbers or the headlines, personally, my group of friends and family, they're getting it. Whether they are in contact with anyone or not, they're just getting it. This is so highly contagious. And some of the media has been fair. For example, CNN, it seems very liberal, seems like it has its own narrative, and all media do. But they have came out with news that says that, hey, this might end up being a blessing in disguise. And the fact is, it's a lot milder. The symptoms are milder, and herd immunity may be the only way to go, because we cannot continue. If you shut down the economy, you lock down, when people have no way to earn a living, then it's suicide. It's death either way. Whether it's a slow or fast death. Your mental health, your financial wealth, your job market, your economy, all that's tied in. While we saying that's more important than human life, it is not. But at what cost, and what is the balance? We don't know. We cannot assume, and we cannot just dictate that. And now I see both sides. So there's some observations I want to give you. It's funny, because we've been in Houston. I have not traveled at all. The only time I go anywhere is to drive to the countryside to hike. So for the last 2 years, we've been really locked down. Our first trip out on a plane to California, it was kind of shocking because, number one, they say you have to test negative to be on a plane. I test before I leave and I test when I arrive, with or without symptoms. Okay, I just want to make sure. I have children, needs to go back to school. What's funny is that whatever airline rules there's a self-test. You don't know if people are going to be honest about it or not. Because I saw plenty of people coughing and sneezing on the plane. Plenty. And plenty of people with their masks under their nose. Okay. But when we got to LA, this was shocking. And my friends there told me very clearly, In Orange County, which is more Republican, you don't have to wear a mask outdoors. You don't have to show a vaccine card. A lot more relaxed. In LA County, that is a lot more Democratic. You have to show a vaccine card to go in a restaurant. You have to wear a mask indoors and outdoors. It's a lot more stricter. Yet, are the numbers better?
No.
There is and then the run on test kits at home, it is ridiculous. The amount of revenue generated from this and all the testing centers that are charging for profit and whatnot, they're everywhere. Every few miles, there is one. It is absolutely ridiculous. I cannot believe it. So I don't know what to tell you, my friend. I think you're right about herd immunity. I think that's the only way to go. It's not that whether you're right or wrong. It's that we do not have a choice, but this is what's going to happen.
Right.
Either we choose to accept it,
right,
prepare for it, or not. Now, I'm just happy to hear that you've recovered and that you did not have any major symptoms. I'm going through it now. So luckily, my children did not test positive. We'll test again to see what happens. But it really is almost a sign of relief.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that I think has been a huge missed opportunity here is the medical establishment could have emphasized the importance of general health, emphasized losing weight, exercising, being outside. Not only is outside a better protection because the ability to both transmit and receive the droplets and the aerosol is smaller outside, but outside you get more sunlight, you get better exercise. All those things all work together. And the absolute biggest factor in people getting sick all the way through with all of the variants has been diabetes.
Oh.
And diabetes is a disease that can be controlled and that can be, for most people, not all, but can be improved dramatically with changes in
health and diet.
Diet primarily. And a lot of the diabetes is sociological. It's cultural, sociological. It's the way certain groups of people choose to behave.
Healthy diet, more mindfulness instead of having some discipline, instead of taking the cheapest and easiest way out for convenience. This fast food culture. I did not know that diabetes is the number one contributing factor. But I could tell you, though, traveling and seeing people, seeing how we interact socially, how it's changed, how we view each other, and seeing the friends that have gone it or have spread it unknowingly. You can never blame anyone for it. You can never know how you got it. You just don't know. You really, really don't. And everyone has mild symptoms. I don't know. I knock on wood. I don't know anyone that was seriously in danger or have any adverse reactions. So everyone I know literally just have a few cough and then recover quickly. And let's hope that I'll be able to go through the same process as you did.
Yeah.
And
then you're fortunate, Jimmy, that you have a profession that allows you probably to work from home.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then we have enough space at the house to everyone to isolate and quarantine. The fact that we're in this country where we have power and water and food plentiful. Yes, a gripe on the run on testing kits and rescheduling and all that. Compared to most, we are in the best place in the world. People make fun of Texas. When I was in LA, they said, "Oh, you're from Texas." Well, some people are envious. No masks, no vaccine, business go on as usual. I wish I was there. Some will say, "Oh, good Lord, you stay away from me." But what they don't know is that there's the majority of Texans like us we're not we're not swayed by politics or by perspectives. We believe in science. We respect what the government advises based on the information they have, and we do our part. Whether we're from Texas or from New York or from California, there's going to be the extremist does not represent us, and we cannot let that become the norm or the majority view. On to better news.
Yeah.
Or maybe not worse news. We have a lot to cover, to be honest, with what's going on in DC and in the market. But we just want to say we're thankful. I know that during Christmas, we said some things. What is your New Year's wishes or outlooks this year? Personally, professionally, whatever you could think of that you would like to share.
I think that we all become more aware of things, aware of the real aspect of science, just applying awareness to what we're talking about here, and that we become more tolerant. We become less judgmental. We become more friendly to each other, not suspect other people's motives, and set examples for other people and live and lead by example. I see people across the political spectrum and frankly across the business spectrum too, behaving in ways that a generation or two ago would have been considered abhorrent, that would not have been deemed acceptable, pardon me. And I think we need to be a whole lot less crude, coarse, and as a society, again, be a lot more tolerant and accepting. One of the organizations I belong to, the code is there are two kinds of people in the organization. There are those who are talking and those who are waiting to talk. And I find it far more interesting and beneficial to listen a lot more than I talk. And when I'm in a group of people, if they want to talk, that's absolutely fine. I'm willing to listen, or I'm willing to tune them out.
It's funny. I just read a book. One of the traits of extraordinary people, and is not judged by their profession, by the way. When I say extraordinary, is what they've contributed, the legacies, or what they've helped. Right. One of the big attributes is someone that listens, but not just listen, that observes, that watches and see things, how it works. Seeing a person's interaction, their reaction, their nonverbal clues. I've read many years ago an FBI book on looking at how to decipher someone's body language. I forgot a lot of them, but in the end, whether you're truthful and honest with yourself, it reflects. You live a good life, and in Chinese we call it your qi. If your qi is good, it's good. You could pretend and hide for a short term, but in the long run, it's best to be humble, be grateful, be thankful. By the grace of God, give thanks, show gratitude, and that's all I want this year. So show gratitude, to be thankful for what we have.
And along that, to help you make your point, I think life is a mirror.
It is.
I think that people treat you as you treat others, and behavior is also contagious. Back to the COVID discussion.
I'm very ashamed to.
Behavior is very contagious.
I'm glad you said that. Treat people as you want to be treated, and it's contagious, because I cannot practice what I preach. I'm a very hot-blooded, emotional person. I'm sure you've seen me during this last year and a half of intense political drama. And I'm learning.
I've seen it once or twice. Yeah.
Oh, more than many times, but yet you've been very kind and you've been patient, and I'm learning so much. And I appreciate your guidance. And I hope this new year I could learn more from you. I hope our audience could glean a lot of info from you. Happy New Year, Jim, to you and your family. I hope you have a wonderful year, and I can't wait to see you next week.
It's starting off just fine. I'm leaving COVID behind in 21. Okay.
Perfect.
Jimmy, thank you. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy 2022.
Listening and watching, and we'll be back next week to re-engage. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Happy New Year.